Today I'm reviewing Gilded Cage by Vic James, which is a fantasy novel that is released on February 14th, I believe. I received an advance reader copy through work in exchange for an honest review, so let's hop right into it. So this is a story told from multiple perspectives, both the equal and the unequal. The equal are those with skill or magical abilities. They are in the top 1%. They govern over everybody in the UK, and they require that the unequal do 10 years of slavery at some point in their lifetime. So you could do it like in the middle of your life, like after you finish high school, go for 10 years and then start your career. You could go at the very end of your life, do hard labor before you die, like plan on dying in the slave labor camps. It's your choice where you put those 10 years. You basically lose all human rights once you agree to your 10 years and that contract begins. So the unequal generally spend most of their time living in modern day British society, in houses, with jobs, going to school, playing on sports teams, being interested in sports teams, that kind of stuff. But then once you sign up for your 10 years, that's it. You get completely removed from society for 10 years. We follow multiple perspectives, almost too many perspectives in my opinion. I would say two of the main perspectives that we see most often are these siblings, Luke and Abby. Abby has just finished high school and she arranges for her family, the whole family, to do their 10 years together. So she gets them a job on an estate working for the most high up family in terms of equalness, I guess. So they have been a part of the founding of this government the longest, in this system the longest. So they're as close as royalty as you can get, basically. So she signs her family up to do their 10 years on this estate, figuring it will be cushy and the 10 years will go by fast and there won't be a lot of damage. Despite her signing up for this, the estate doesn't have a job for her teenaged brother. They figure that young boys are trouble and that they're not worth keeping on the grounds. As they're being shipped off to their new slave labor lives, Abby and her mom, dad, and younger sister end up shipped off to the Jardine house, whereas Luke gets thrown in a separate van and taken to Millmore, a slave labor town. And we quickly learn from Luke's perspective that the sort of external idea of what slave labor actually looks like to the unequal is very different from what it is in Millmore. So the idea being that yes, you are enslaved, you're doing 10 years of unpaid labor, but that like human rights are still enforced. That is not the case, as Luke finds very quickly. They're doing hard labor with very little safety regulation. Abby is naively off playing secretary in the Jardine house and being like, oh, well, you know, it's probably hard work, but you know, he's still fine and stuff. The two different perspectives of life as an enslaved unequal was interesting. The part that I didn't like so much was the flipping back and forth between other characters that we really only see one or two times. We see from their perspective just enough to move the plot along. I get why I had to see from that perspective, but it was also a little bit jarring. Like, it might have worked okay as a dual narrative, or maybe even a triple narrative with the one equal son who's doing some pretty sketchy things. One of the things that I did like about the book was the idea of the skill. It's almost like if magic and Harry Potter didn't have the Ministry of Magic and didn't have all of these rules about how you can use magic and who you can use magic on and what types of magic you can use on other people. But then there are things in the Harry Potter series like obliviating someone, like they do with Professor Lockhart. That's done without consent. You probably wouldn't consent to having your mind obliviated. This book, Gilded Cage, sort of, because of how the unequal are treated, how the unequal are enslaved, sort of complicates that idea where magic is being used without consent. There is something called quieting or silencing in Gilded Cage that's very much like obliviating, but it's often described by the unequal who are experiencing this as having someone like painfully rip something out of your mind, and then you just can't remember. You can't remember the context for what you kind of wake up in. And that's something that we don't really see in the Harry Potter series. So I think it's a fairly similar magic. It's a fairly similar magical world in that the magic exists alongside our mundane life, but it's pushed magic and power to its extreme. I think the series sort of questions magic and power and agency, and I am excited to keep reading. This is the first book in a series. I definitely would pick up the second book. Overall, it was a very fast-paced read. It was a fun read. I liked what it was complicating within the fantasy genre. So I think it's interesting if you've read the Harry Potter series to maybe read something like this and see the extremes of what could be done with magic. The one thing I'm not sure if I'm a big fan of is making slavery and racism not about skin color, which is another thing that the Harry Potter series does. It makes racism, I've heard someone describe it as making racism safe because it makes racism white. So when we talk about race, like the racism in Harry Potter, we see like the pure blood versus the mud blood. And Hermione experiences a lot of prejudice, and you can kind of parallel that to racism in the real world. We can think through the problematic treatment of people of color almost at a distance by seeing how other races are treated in the Harry Potter series. It's doing the same thing here in Gilded Cage, and I'm still not sure if I like that approach. I'm not sure I like the idea of whitewashing racism to make it accessible, to a whiter audience. I don't know, if you have thoughts on that, I would love to discuss in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.